Well, good afternoon. My name is Brian Gallagher. I'm one of the hall directors here at SIU, and I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a minute.
And my name is Stephen Yeagley. I'm an Assistant Director of Residence Life at SIU as well.
So our presentation is called What If I Don't Like My Blank? And we chose that title for a lot of reasons. It's kind of funny, and it's supposed to be kind of funny. But when you look at it in the blank, what are we really talking about here? It's what if I don't like my supervisor? Or what if I don't like my job? Or what if I don't like a resident or an office mate, or perhaps my apartment, or maybe my job title, or a person who I supervise, or a policy that our department has, or really anything. What we're really talking about here is things that frustrate you in your job. So before we jump into it too much, we want to talk about who we are. As I mentioned, my name is Brian Gallagher. I'm one of the hall directors here at Southern Illinois University, and I've been here. This is my second year here as a hall director.
Again, I'm Stephen Yeagley, an Assistant Director of Residence Life at SIU. I've also been a live-in staff member at SIU as a hall director as well, and this is my 5th year here.
So that's a little bit of who we are. And our goals for this session, as it said in the description, is really to first help you to figure out some tools so that you can identify what it is that concerns you or really frustrates you. So really labeling it for yourself. And then the second thing that we're going to do is help you to get some tools to help you really handle that issue or figure out how to rationalize it in your head and move beyond that. So those are really kind of our overarching goals today.
So the question, why are we talking about this? To provide some context to the presentation, at SIU we provide training to our full residence life staff both in the fall and in the spring. In the spring, we like to focus a little bit more on professional development with our graduate students and our entry-level professionals. Brian and I did a presentation last year for our graduate students, very similar to this presentation, on really appropriate ways to handle frustration. We've noticed that with graduate students and also with entry-level professionals, there's a lot of navigating that we do in regards to decisions made that we don't agree with. We've heard people venting or complaining, and we'll talk a little bit more about that near the end of the presentation. But the way that people handle frustrations has a direct impact on how people perceive you in the field. And so we thought it'd be important to talk about. As soon as this went up on the IUPUI website, we started receiving questions too about people saying, wow, that sounds like a really taboo topic to discuss. It could be perceived as negative, and it's really just a conversation where we talk about how to go about handling some of those frustrations. So when we did this with our grads, we asked for any examples they had, but this is even a better format to say, if you have scenarios that you would like us to work through, questions about how to navigate a certain conversation, you are more than welcome to type those out. We'll receive that on the screen, and we can incorporate those into examples that we use. We'll also have time at the end, if time allows, to answer any of those questions as well.
And alternatively, if you're looking to maybe have that conversation off the air and off the recording, we can definitely do that after the session, and we can email, or we can do that over Twitter or even on the phone. But yeah, so as we really launch into this, we wanted to start by looking at where we as professionals come from. So we're targeting our presentation to entry-level staff people, and specifically entry-level staff folks in housing. And so that could be a graduate assistant. It could be a hall director, whether it's a first year, second year, third director, hall director, or whatever the title is at your particular institution. But it's also directed towards individuals who supervise those people. So you might be an assistant director somewhere, and you supervise a couple of hall directors, or you supervise some graduate assistants. And as we look at that, we want to start with developmentally, where do we come from? And typically, most of us had a K through 12 experience where we were, a kindergartner once, and at some point, maybe 3rd or 4th grade, we're sitting there in class, and our teacher said, okay, it's time for a math quiz or a math test, and they hand out the test. And you sat there and you thought to yourself, I really don't want to do this. I'm really not interested in taking this math test. That's okay. Fast forward a little bit to maybe high school, and again, you're still being confronted every once in a while with situations that you're not happy with. One of the big changes, at least for me, when it came to high school is that I got to pick my own classes. And so I really chose to have, Mr. Ham for my freshman English class. That really was my teacher's name, Mr. Ham. And I chose him from all the other English teachers that were teaching the freshman English class. So I chose that. I had a little bit of power there. So when you graduate, or when you turn the age where you don't need to be in high school anymore, you have a choice. And most of us in this field chose to go to undergrad. Maybe we took some time off first, but we chose to go to college. And part of that process, again, is you made the decision where you wanted to go. And you made the decision to go to the institution that you chose, or maybe to transfer to another institution after you've been there. You chose the major. Maybe you chose to change majors a couple times. But again, you have more power. You have more control. You got to choose your classes. Some of you got to choose your roommate. Again, it's all about really having more control over the situation. So fast forward to the end of that, you graduated, congratulations, and now you've decided to go into graduate school. And again, your ability to control your surroundings has gotten a little bbigger. Now you get to choose the field that you want to study. So many of us chose college student personnel, or higher ed, or student affairs, or something in that line, or counseling field. And again, you choose to choose your assistantship or not an assistantship, and you get to make these decisions and really have impact over your situation. Fast forward to the professional job, that control gets even bigger. And really what we're talking about is that something here changed from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, all the way up until your current position. And what we call it is, we call it your locus of control, or our locus of control. And so it's the things that I do control versus the things that I do not control. So going back to that fourth grade math test, when my teacher handed that to me, I have the choice to fill it out or not fill it out. But really, ultimately, I don't have the choice. It's part of the math curriculum. I need to do that. I could choose to put my name on it or somebody else's name. Again, I do have some control. But now let's fast forward to graduate school. One of the things that I know about myself is that I have a real struggle with multiple choice tests. And I know that I'm really good when it comes to speaking or writing. And so I chose the graduate courses that I wanted to take based on how the faculty members were doing the assessment. And so I emailed them ahead of time and I said, hi, I'm in this master's program. I'm interested in your class, number 456 and whatever the description is. I was wondering if I could talk to you about how you assess your student learning. And was able to have some really great conversations with some faculty members, and thus was able to choose some classes that I knew that at least going into it, I had a chance to be successful. Fast forward to my current position, I have a lot of control. I have a staff of 32 RAs that I co-supervise here. I have 2 graduate assistants that I co-supervise. And I have a lot of ability to not only mold them as individuals and help them make their decisions and help them to work for me, but I also have ultimately the power to terminate if that's what we needed to do. And that's a lot of control. But there are certain things that I don't control. I don't control the logo that my institution is using. I personally like it, but I don't control that. And so really over this whole time, our locus of control changes. And that's something that as you mature as a professional, you need to figure out how to kind of understand that. So where we're going from here is really as you take that locus of control and those things that you can control and you can't control, you need to control or understand at least the expectations attached with that. So we've got 4 different types of expectations we're talking about. We're talking about yours, we're talking about your supervisors, your employees, anybody who works for you, and then obviously for my situation, my residents. And for many of the folks we're targeting this webinar at, your residents or your customers is how you might view that as well. And so it's all about understanding and managing your expectations and their expectations. So for example, with that situation I talked about with the logo of our institution, which by the way I like, I need to know that I like it. Okay, what if I didn't like it? Then I need to realize that that's my expectation is that I need to be able to handle that, and I need to be able to figure out how to work my way through that. Maybe a better example is with my supervisor. I know that my supervisor wants an email from me after any sort of serious incident occurs in our building, and the email needs to be in a specific format. Well, what if I really don't want to send that email at 4 in the morning and I would rather wait until 8 in the morning? That's a frustration that I have. I really think that I should go to bed at 4 in the morning and I should wake up in the morning and send that email to him later. Personally, I don't feel that way, but if that was my frustration, then that's really bugging me. It's my supervisor's expectation that one thing happens, and it's my expectation that a different things happen. And I need to really figure out how to deal with that and how to get past that conflict. Like when it comes to our residents, we have a lot of expectations that we're constantly managing. We have a contract with our residents here that says we'll provide a place for you to live, generally secure environment, that will have staff doing programming, that will provide, a meal plan, and all these other things. Meanwhile, the residents need to uphold their end of the bargain with, abiding by the conduct code and obviously paying the bill and all those other pieces. And so I know that, these are different expectations that need to be managed. The other night, actually last year, we had a power outage in our building, and therefore our students, their expectations were changed pretty quickly. And students weren't so happy about this. And it was my job to say, wow, my students are upset with this. How can I communicate with them and help them to understand what's going on and what needs to happen? I found that I was able to, reach out on our Facebook page, but also to knock on doors and really talk with people and explain, yes, the power's out. Yes, we have a plan, and this is what it is and whatnot. And that really helped the situation. But it was understanding that the expectations of our residents changed very, very quickly. And that's really the next thing we want to talk about, is that the expectations often change. And whether it's my expectations or residents' expectations or my supervisors, that's part of the deal. And that's part of what you need to really look at. And so when you have something that frustrates you, you ultimately have to answer this question: should I stay or should I go? And that's really kind of the pinnacle, if you will, or the point that we're really trying to ask us is, should I stay or should I go? And this is a question that I think we often ask ourselves. We might be sitting there in a staff meeting and we're learning about a new policy that, this is what the director of housing wants, and, the assistant directors are talking about it, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, gosh, I don't like that. Well, do I want to leave or do I want to stay and figure out a way through it? And that's really the question. And I think attached to that is, and it's really important, is to understand your attitude and understand that your attitude is really important. And so I may be sitting there in that staff meeting and hearing about a new policy, or maybe it's a new duty procedure or whatnot, and I might be really frustrated on the inside, but I need to think to myself, okay, what is my face showing? And more importantly, what are my, if I raise my hand to speak or if I start to talk and part of the conversation, what is my tone of voice presenting? Am I saying very loudly, hey, I think this is horrible? Or am I saying, I have some concerns about this, or I'm not sure how I feel about it, and I want to understand it a little bit more? And again, it's all about controlling your attitude. And I think it's also important that as you walk out of that meeting, and I walk into my next meeting, maybe it's a one-on-one with one of my RAs, I'm really frustrated, and I need to be able to figure out how to control my attitude as I walk into that meeting. So again, it kind of boils down to that question of, should I stay or should I go? And this is that moment where some of you are humming the song, should I stay or should I go now? And that's okay, because we purposely designed the webinar that way, so you would hum the song. Moving on a little bit. Proactive change is the next thing we're going to talk about, and it's really understanding that you have the ability to change some things. So in a situation where the duty structure changes, I have the ability to change myself. I can say, nope, I will not be here anymore. I decide to leave. Another thing that I can try to change is the them. The them in this case would be maybe my direct supervisor or maybe my department. And then the third thing that you can really look at is looking at the system. And the system would be here our university or maybe our department-wide policies and procedures that occur. And it's understanding that I can change some of these things, but I can't change all of these things. And it's realizing how to change them. And I think as I kind of highlight here, the them and the system, these two are key. It's real easy for me to change my own opinion about something. Sometimes it's a lot more tricky to change departmental policy, or to sit down with my supervisor and say, hey, I really need this situation to change. So 3 quick kind of coping strategies that I want to talk about is, the first one is really understanding the concept of time. As a hall director here at SIU, I might be here for 3 years, I might be here for 2 years, I might be here for 1 year, I might be here for 4 years, who knows? And some of these policies have been crafted over and over again. Every single semester there are updates to it. And every single semester there are changes. And that concept of time, for me as a hall director, is very different than it is for my supervisor, who may be here for 10 years, or 20 years, or 8 years, or 6 years, or who knows. And so it's figuring out what that really means, time for me versus time for the system. I think another thing to figure out is understanding and really learning about the system, and learning about what I can control and change and what I cannot control and change, and figuring out how do I do that? How do I reckon with that stuff? And I think a lot of that is asking questions and really figuring out where to ask questions. And the final point that Stephen's really going to talk about is figuring out who to talk with and how to navigate those conversations.
So we'll go with that you've decided that you want to talk to somebody about whatever it is that's bothering you. Really, before you go have a conversation and before you decide who you're talking to, you need to be able to answer these 3 questions for yourself. Are you looking to change something? Are you seeking understanding of something? Or are you wanting to complain about something? Now, for the purpose of these next few slides, and as we discuss these 3 options, I'll throw out a scenario. We just had the Super Bowl yesterday. So we'll assume for the sake of this conversation that you're a live-in staff member and that you supervise the RAs that live in your building. We'll say that on Friday, this last Friday, you received an email in the afternoon that said, based on what we're seeing through social media, there's an anticipation that there may be some policies being violated this weekend in your building. We're expecting additional guests. We're expecting alcohol consumption or parties happening that have alcohol present. And so because of this, we're taking a response that we're asking that any staff that have not approved to be gone for vacation or any staff that have leave requests approved, we're saying that they're all on duty now. This includes you. This includes all of your RAs. We're expecting additional rounds and an increased visibility for the weekend. So weekend happens. There wasn't any additional, maybe some more guests, but there wasn't really any changes to a normal weekend in your building. No real additional conduct issues. So it may have felt as if all of that was done with really no results. Today's Monday. You've got a one-on-one with your supervisor tomorrow, and you know that you're frustrated about this weekend because you did have plans to be gone with a friend celebrating the Super Bowl, but instead you had to stay in your building and coordinate all of this additional duty and expectations. So we're going to take that approach as we talk through these next 3. So really, these are the questions you're asking before your one-on-one with your supervisor. We're going to start off with change. That's what you want to do. You are looking to change things. Really, it's can you articulate what you're wanting to change? Now, I think most of us, if not all of us, have heard, we'll never go in and complain without a solution. And that's a good piece of advice, but it isn't always helpful as it doesn't always capture what the option is. I think a lot of people that I've worked with, and you may have experienced this with staff that you supervise, as long as they show up with a solution, they assume that there's going to be something done. So with that, you need to understand that your solution may not be welcomed at the moment or really ever. So let's say Brian came in to tell me, hey, I was really upset about how the Super Bowl went. I don't feel like we received enough notification. It felt like it was a knee-jerk reaction. There weren't really any results showing that there was a need for increased duty. And he even comes with a solution in mind. It doesn't mean that anything may go past that room. However, in order to be best prepared, Brian needs to show up assuming that change is possible, and he needs to be prepared to discuss it. So we're going to talk about how he can be best considered when he shows up in the room. So you need to know what you want to change, why you want to change it, and how it might be possible. A lot of the times when I'm meeting with students, they may come with a concern that they want to change, but they're not able to articulate what specifically about it they're looking to change. So in this instance, we'll say that Brian was okay with the increased duty, but he wishes that there was more time. He wants increased notification for staff when we're needing to change duty. So that's what he's wanting to change. When he says why he wants to change it, it may be that it will receive better buy-in from staff if they're able to better, like maybe they can better plan. and how it might be possible. So he may come with solutions on, well, if all of this came from social media, maybe we could be monitoring it better so that we can be prepared earlier next time around. Now, more than one idea for a solution is great, because you might get your first idea shot down based on some logistics, and if you aren't prepared with another idea, that might end the conversation. If there's an opportunity for discussion, you should be prepared in advance to address concerns or feedback. It is very rare in this field that decisions are made without some type of thought put into it. We are always operating under the doing the right thing. You know, you do the right thing when you need to make a decision. And so somebody believed that that was the right thing. So they'll have concerns or feedback for any potential ideas that you have to change, and you should be able to anticipate some of those. Now, a big thing to hit, and I think this is a frequent mistake people make, or a frequent assumption, is that the absence of a no does not equal a yes. So when you go into that meeting and you say, these are things I want to change, just because you did not hear the word no does not mean that at some point things will change. If you make that assumption, you might be setting yourself up for future frustration when the same process repeats itself. Also with that, the absence of a yes does not equal a no. So just because I can't say in that meeting, yeah, I think these are some great things we can implement, doesn't mean that it is going to be the same next time. So the next option that you have is you can really be going into a meeting really hoping just to understand more about the thing that is frustrating you. And so in this instance, Brian might not be looking to change things for the future. He might be more interested in understanding what is it that led to this decision, who was involved in this decision, are there things that I can learn as a professional to better have me set up to anticipate on my own next time around. And really doing that, it's about asking appropriate questions. Now, we had the conversation with our graduate assistants last year when we said there are stupid questions, their eyes kind of got a little big, because you always hear there are no stupid questions. We say it a lot with the staff that we supervise. It's more important to ask the question than not, so there are no stupid questions. Well, there really are. And it's understanding that that's possible. And the reason that we hit it like that and in that language is because failure to understand that could have a negative impact on people's perception of you. And so really, if I were to say a stupid question that, or what a type of stupid question that I hear a lot, or things that I would say have already been answered. And so before asking a question, there are some things you should consider. One is the timing. If you really want a quality discussion that lasts longer than 5 minutes, you should really set up an appointment and provide a heads up about what you want to talk about ahead of time. That way, 100% of the focus can be on the conversation. It's not divided attention, and you can really go through exploring and learning about that decision that frustrated you. Resources. Can you find the answer by referencing emails, manuals, or websites? I feel like the majority of the time that I get asked a question where the resource has already been sent, the staff member could have probably found it within 5 minutes of looking, but they were so eager to have the discussion that they didn't spend those 5 minutes to look. And then the purpose of the question. Is it really that you're seeking understanding? Are you seeking to change things? Or really, is this question a way of complaining about it? And really, for this conversation, you really want it to be about understanding. So as you're having the conversation, listen to what's being said and summarize what you've learned during the conversation. There's a few reasons for doing that. One is that summarizing it's going to put it in your words, and it's going to make it easier for you to share that answer with others. I know a lot of the times that I'm speaking with staff, it's because their RAs have expressed frustration, and they're needing to be able to understand it themselves but also share it back with staff. So summarizing gives you the opportunity to practice it, and it also gives that person that you're talking with the opportunity to correct the assumptions that you made in your summary, or to say, yes, that's absolutely right. That's a great way of explaining it. And then afterwards, follow up on any additional resources that were given. So I know when staff talks to me about really trying to understand something, I might provide some additional resources, some additional questions for them to explore. I may give them some prompts to talk with some other individuals too. And so making sure you follow up with those resources is a great way for that person to know that you really took the conversation seriously and that you appreciated the time that they gave you, in addition to making sure that you thank the person for their time. Now, a big thing to hit with this is that if you leave without understanding, you should ask for advice for the next step. Sometimes this might be that, who is it that I talk to? Is the advice that you give your supervisor the time to solicit feedback and to get the answer for you so that you're not the one going exploring for it?
I think this is, for me, an opportunity that I use email a lot, both as a supervisor and also as a supervisee. I've met with my supervisor, and we had a discussion about something, and then I might email them afterwards and say, hey, I feel like we talked about A, B, and C. I really wanted to talk more about C, or I have some more questions about C. Could you maybe help me understand that a little bit more? Because I'm one of those people who needs to process things afterwards. But also as a supervisor, I do the same thing. I actually learned it in a Glucuho webinar from Deb Schmidt-Rogers. After a one-on-one with my RAs, I send them an email saying, hey, this is a summary of what we talked about. And really it's an opportunity for me to reflect on it and really remember, hey, I really wanted to highlight this little piece that you asked for understanding on that I didn't fully explain in a way that I felt like I could have done a little bit more. So that's one of the ways that I utilize this kind of understanding piece a little more.
Now, this last area to talk about, I think, is the one that receives the most conversation, and it may lead to some questions that you have, and we welcome any of those, but it's really the choice to complain. And we've listed it as necessary, but that it's also dangerous. And a lot of you might be saying right now, well, I don't complain, I only vent. Right? I only vent. It's appropriate venting. It's very different than complaining because venting is acceptable. And it does have its place. Complaining has its place and has value. A challenge that we put to our staff last year and that we would put to you as well is to really try to replace the word venting with complaining. At least for some time, anytime you hear somebody say that they're venting, mark it as complaining. And anytime you see yourself wanting to vent, where you go into somebody's office and you say, hey, I just need to vent for a second, really own it as complaining. And the reason that we say that is that because venting is such a friendly term, it's something that people do fairly easily. People are a little bit more hesitant when you label it as complaining, and there's a good purpose to that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, some of the benefits to complaining are very similar to what you would say for venting, in the sense that I need to get it I just need to vocalize it. I need to put it all out there. It'll help me calm down. It'll help me make a better decision once I've just gotten it out there. Or it might be that once you get it out there, you don't even feel the need to do anything else with it. So we're going to talk about some strategies. One is really finding your buddy. So who is that person that you can complain to? Now, a lot of times, and I know I had a rule when I was co-supervising, me and my hall partner, there are 2 hall directors in the building, so me and the person that I was working with, we had a rule that we would always say good morning before we said anything bad. Because sometimes the very first thing you want to do, your greeting is almost, let me tell you about, fill in the blank. And so one of the things that we've put in here is you should really be asking for permission to complain. You should know if they've already had a bad day. We live together, we work together, we see each other all of the time. Those nonverbals are really easy for us. If the person that you trust to complain to has already had a bad day, don't add to it. That's a good opportunity for you to change your plans for the conversation and make their day better than it was. You'll probably find that it makes your need to complain a lot lower because you're going to feel better about the conversation anyway. You should also know their comfort levels and their opinions. It might be that the thing that's really bothering you is something that they had a part in deciding, that they really buy into. And so if you go in just assuming they have the same opinions you have, you might really hurt the relationship or at least give yourself a really awkward moment. Another point is not to share information that puts the other person in an unethical place. And so when this example was written, it's really coming from the standpoint of maybe a staff member tells you something that you know you are now going to have to report up, and you're really frustrated about it, and you're really disappointed in maybe the employee that shared it with you, and so you're wanting to complain about this to another individual before you've resolved the situation. And that could really put them in a difficult place as well. The last thing, and I feel like this is one that you see happen over and over, especially with, for the grads listening, your cohort, and for entry-level professionals that are living in, don't complain about coworkers to coworkers. It really puts you in a negative light, even if the person that you're complaining to might hold the same views. It's really unethical. It's really inappropriate. And so you should just make it a rule of thumb not to complain about coworkers to coworkers. With that being said, it is not bad to have somebody that you trust that you can talk to outside of your department. So really keep that in mind. Don't mask complaining is something else. There's a lot of different ways that people do this. An example that I could use is I get to have one-on-ones with Brian each week, and when Brian comes in, I've already had some different experiences throughout the day, and it's very possible that I'll be frustrated with something I'm handling right before Brian comes in. Now, being Brian's supervisor, a way that I could mask complaining is I could say, oh, well, I just had to deal with this parent about these things, yada, yada, yada. I complain, and then I say, I'm really sharing this with you for your own professional development since you might be in this position soon. And so this is an opportunity for you to learn. So at that point, I've called it something else, but it's really me complaining. It's important to, once you've gotten it out, just get it out. If you need to complain to it, get it out, get over it, understand it, or change it. Now, if you cannot do any of those three options, if you really cannot get over it, you really cannot understand it, or you really cannot change it, then you need to consider if you need to leave that situation or leave that position. Complaining should not be happening daily. And I think this makes sense to all of us, but I think we forget to self-reflect on how often we find ourselves doing that. Complaining is really a sign of unhappiness, and we spend more time together as colleagues in the office, more wait time together than we do often with family, with friends. And so if you're in a situation where you're really complaining frequently, then you're really unhappy frequently. And if that's the case, you really need to reconsider what you're doing. And it might be the approach that you're taking. It might be where you're finding yourself spending all of your time. And it goes back to those expectations Brian talked about at the beginning. You may have taken a position with the expectation that the majority of your student interaction would be positive. And maybe you're in a week where the majority of your student interaction is negative. It's based on conduct. It's based on duty responses. But if you see yourself complaining regularly, it really is a point to reconsider what you're doing. It could be that your values aren't aligning with the department's values. It might be that this is not the field for you to continue your work in, or it might not be housing. You might want to transition to something else. And an example of that would be if you're always complaining about unscheduled things happening or work hours outside of the normal 8 to 5 that others get to experience in other fields. So if you find yourself in that situation, really revisit it. So with that, we've thrown a lot of information out there. We've done a lot of talking to. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, or you have any opinions or examples that you've worked through, now's a great time to type it. The majority of the responses we've received so far have been based on people humming along with should you stay or should you go. And so thank you for that feedback. That's been great.
Here's that moment where you can do it again. Should you stay or should you go? And I think as we wait for some questions to come in, we started with this slide here, and it's people at a workplace, clatter, 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 thinking about that question, should I stay or should I go? And so, it's okay that you do think about that. And we, as Stephen mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, we are aware this is a taboo subject. We are aware that some of you are going to walk away from this and go, wow, I really just thought about that for a while. Some of you are going to want to talk to a mentor or talk with a friend or that person that Stephen was talking about that is your go-to person. And that's okay, and have those questions and really think about it. I know that, as I was talking about with the locus of control, as you mature and as you have more options and more ability to change things, sometimes you do need to change what you're doing. And sometimes that's a really tough question to answer and really think thoroughly about. And so we really challenge you to have that conversation with yourself, and really be honest. And if you are finding yourself, if you want to call it venting and we're calling it complaining, if you are complaining a lot, take a moment to really think about the questions you're asking and think about kind of where you're going with things. So at this point, we are not getting any more questions or any questions, so we're going to go ahead and end our webinar. And so really, this is us. What if I don't like my blank? And we want you to think about that. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with us. And I'm going to hand it back over to Eric. So thank you, Eric.
Thank you both. Great presentation. It really gets us thinking. If anybody does have any follow-up questions at this point, please feel free to contact our presenters directly. I am getting a few notes of thank you in here. So guys, the positive feedback here is what we're seeing. So great job. As a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be available on our website, glucuho.org, under the resources heading. Look for webinar archives, and I should have it up by the end of the day tomorrow. For anybody that's traveling to Camp Tecumseh this weekend for the winter meeting, have a safe travel, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.